and welcome back to That History Dude. Today we're going to finish up the House of Wessex and going to get into how House of Wessex fell from the Kingdom of England and the rise of Harold and then the rise of the House of Normandy with William the Conqueror and his invasion and what led up to that. So in my last video, we ended with Edward the Martyr. From over here, he was the 8th king. In this video, we are going to start with his half-brother, Æthelred the Unready. So Æthelred the Unready, who was king of England, he was technically the 9th king of England and also the 11th, with a slight intercession in the center of his reign because of invasion. He had to deal with a lot during his reign. This is a portrait of Æthelred. Now, his first marriage was to Æthelred of York, who lived from 963 to 1002. She was the daughter of Thord, Alderman of York. Now, the alliances of Wessex and Mercia and now York were tenuous at best. Æthelred had to secure York. Yes, York was under England's rule and no longer was under Danish rule or Viking rule, so to speak. But he needed to secure it a little bit further. Now, with this marriage, he produced 2 daughters and 2 sons. He had Elfgifu, Edith, Athelstan, and Edmund II Ironside, who would later become king after his death. To get into his first daughter, Elfgifu, married Uhtred the Bold, Alderman of Northumbria. Here, with his daughter, he secured even more of the northern realms of England, bordering Scotland. With his second daughter, Edith, he married her to Edric Strona, who was the Alderman of Mercia. So now he has an alliance with Mercia, with Northumbria, and with York. He has a stable realm. Athelstan never married. He died childless. And then Edmund II married a woman by the name of Edith. We don't know much about her. This is the portrait of Edmund. And together they would have children. I don't want to get into them just yet. There's a lot more about Æthelred that I want to cover first. Now, Emma comes from across the English Channel from Normandy, a very, very rich and technologically advanced duchy. Normandy already was practicing the feudalism that we all know and, think of when you hear the word feudalism. Kings, dukes, counts, lords, barons. They had stone castles already in the continent of Europe, on mainland continent. They didn't have many stone castles already in England by this point. Yes, some were constructed in Mercia, but not to the extent of like it was in France and in Normandy. it would be the Normans that, when they invaded, they brought that influence and that technology, and they fortified England. Now, Emma would have children with Aethelred. And these children were Edward the Confessor, who would also later become king, Godgifu, and Alfred Atheling, who also died without marrying and without having children. Now, back to Aethelred. Aethelred was able to fight back the Vikings with the help of Olaf Haraldsson, who was attacking Sweyn's forces in Norway. What I mean by this is that in 1013, Sweyn Forkbeard, who was king of Denmark, Norway, and England, once he had conquered Denmark and taken Norway, he set his sights on England, raiding, pillaging, trying to take back York. There was a contender to Norway, and so Sweyn was only able to hold England for about 3 years before his own death. And this is a portrait of Sweyn here. Now also, he is the son of Harold Bluetooth, who died in 986. Sweyn died about 1014. And his son was Cnut the Great, who would create the North Sea Empire. So, technically, Sweyn is the 10th king of England. And then it would revert back to Æthelred, again with the help of Olaf Haraldsson, and attacking Sweyn's forces in Norway, while Æthelred was attacking Sweyn's forces in England, ending his terror of England and allowing Æthelred to regain the crown. Now, while the invasion is happening, Emma sends her children to Normandy to be with their uncle Richard II, while England was again being invaded by Cnut. So when Æthelred died, Cnut thought it prudent to take his father's claim of England and invade again. So, Edward, Godgifu, and Alfred were raised in Normandy. Emma survived her husband because Æthelred died in 1016. Emma was politically savvy. She went ahead and married Cnut, securing her place in England, securing her children, securing her life. Now, this was Cnut's second marriage. Cnut did first marriage another Anglo-Saxon woman, Aelfgifu of Northampton, who is the daughter of Elfhelm, another alderman of York. Now, I did try to find if Elfhelm, the father of Aelfgifu of Northampton, who was alderman of York, was in some way, shape, or form related to Thorid, alderman of York, who is the father of Aelfgifu of York. What I found was instead that they were not related, but they were rivals. That Æthelred, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe it was his father, I don't quite remember, Edgar, that kicked out Ethelhelm and placed Thorid as Alderman of York, which then scorned Elfhelm and led to Elfgifu having a feud with Thorid and with the House of Wessex, which then probably could have even driven Cnut even more into wanting to invade England for his wife's claim to York. But again, sources are scant at best. Now, to Edmund's family. Edmund Ironside was King of England for several months. He was King of England from the death of his father, Aethelred, who died in February, to his own death when he died in October of the same year. Edmund fought. He fought, I think it was 5 battles between himself and Cnut. He had some very treacherous family members, most notably his brother-in-law. So Edric, the Alderman of Mercia, wants to betray his father-in-law, Aethelred, when Cnut invaded. Edric joined with Cnut, and Cnut used his fleet and forces to fight against Edmund, his brother-in-law. According to the Encomium Emiet, it was done under claim that those executed had not fought faithfully for their liege, Edmund, and whom he, Cnut, knew to have been deceitful and to have hesitated between the two sides with fraudulent tergiversation. This is a quote directly from this primary source, where it also says that Cnut ordered Earl Eric Hackinson to pay this man what we owe him, and then quickly chopped off Edric's head with his axe. And for any of you listening and watching this video, if you have watched the show Vikings, there's a scene where when Cnut invades England, there was a traitor, Edric, that betrayed his kings, his father-in-law Æthelred, and his brother-in-law Edmund, to Cnut, and expects to be rewarded for his betrayal. Cnut, although he won, and yes, he executed those who were loyal to the House of Wessex, he also executed Edric because he could not stand traitors. And it's portrayed in the show Vikings, and it's actually a very real thing that happened. With Edmund dying, Cnut allowed his children to flee. So Edward the Exile was king only in name, because he and his family, his brother Edmund most notably, and his mother, they were exiled while the Vikings under Cnut, were in charge of England. Edward would go ahead and end up marrying Agatha Arpad of Hungary. And Edmund would end up marrying Hedwig of Hungary. Edward and Agatha would have 3 children: Margaret, Edgar, and Christina of Wessex. Edgar II and his sisters were hostages of Williams for a year, and this is William the Conqueror. Again, this is much later. I want to cover them so I can focus on William's invasion. Then they were exiled and accepted into the court of Malcolm III Canmore Danegeld, King of Scots, because of Margaret's marriage to Malcolm, the King of Scots. And together, if you watched my other videos on the Dangelds, they would go on to have the continuous line of the kings of Scotland. Edgar, he died childless, and Christina, she died by 1100 childless as well. But they did live peacefully in the court of Scotland with their sister and brother-in-law. Quick point. There is some thoughts and some mystery to Edmund. Edmund, with his marriage to Hedwig of Hungary, there are some sources that state that he stayed in Hungary and settled in the region of Bohemia, or what would later become Bohemia, and that there were some lords there from their marriage. Now, nothing's for certain. The only evidence that we have is that their heraldry, their crests, are very similar to the House of Wessex. The dragon or the wyvern, this crest can be found in that region. And there's nothing in that region that's similar to this. The only other influence would have come from England. And we know that the House of Wessex did go there in exile. So we really don't have an idea as to how that happened or why they adopted some of the heraldry. And the only reason that you would adopt heraldry is if it was from your ancestors or from your family. So with that said, that's why some historians believe that there are maybe some lords or counts that exist today that are direct male descendants from the House of Wessex, stemming from Edmund and Hedwig, going down into, maybe Eastern Germany or Hungary and that area of Europe. Now back to Emma of Normandy, because most of what's going to happen next with the Normans all stems from her. So, as I said before, Emma, her first marriage was to Aethelred. Together they had these children, Edward, Godwinson, Alfred. They were sent to their uncle. If you look up here, Emma, I have her tied to her sibling, Richard II, Duke of Normandy. Her children were raised in Normandy, away from the fighting and the ravaging and the invasions from the Vikings, from both Sweyn and from his son Cnut. So they were raised together with their cousin, Robert I, the Duke of Normandy. Now, Emma, being politically savvy, as I said before, married the invader, Cnut, because her husband died, and she wanted to save herself and her children. So, Cnut reigns. And from his first marriage, Æthelgifu, his children are Harold, Harefoot, who becomes the 14th King of England after his father's death. He has a brother, Sweyn Knutsson, who takes the kingdom of Norway So each son takes a kingdom. Harold Harefoot has a son, Elfwin Haroldson, but he never makes a claim for the Kingdom of England after his father's death. And he disappears into obscurity in history. Now, from Cnut's marriage to Emma, they have Harthacnut, who takes the Kingdom of England after his brother's death and becomes the 15th king. And he has a sister, Gunhild of Denmark. This is a portrait of Harthacnut, and this is the portrait of Harold Harefoot. Now, after the Vikings are done, Emma installs her son, Edward, as King of England. Because again, mind you, the other branch of the family from Edmund's and Edward's branch, they were in mainland continental Europe, away from all this, so they really couldn't do anything. Meanwhile, Edward and Alfred and Golgifu were just across the English Channel. And their mother was still alive, handling business, so to speak. So, Edward marries Edith of Wessex. Edith of Wessex is the daughter of Godwin, Earl of Wessex, and the daughter of Geitha, Thorke's daughter. Now, Godwin did have several other children that I have not mentioned here. He had, I think it was something like 6 or 7 children. But I put the two most pertinent to the House of Wessex. Edward was brothers-in-law with Harold. Edward is given the nickname the Confessor because he was a very holy man, and as portrayed by in the new series in on Amazon Prime, Edward supposedly confessed right before his death, because he was in a coma for a time. Right before his death, to his brother-in-law, Harold, that he wanted him to become king. Now, whether that is true or not, we will never know. What we do know for certain is that he did speak to Harold, saying that he wanted Harold to protect his wife, to protect his sister, and his brother. Well, not his brother, but because Alfred would be dead already by this time. But he wants to protect England and most notably his wife, Edith. I guess Harold might have taken that to mean to become king. He may have made it up. I don't know. But what is for certain is that the Anglo-Saxons, they came together and they elected Harold Godwinson as King of England because they needed a king. Edward did not have any children. Alfred was already dead. And the other branch of the family was in, mainland continental Europe, and they couldn't be sent for or reached or whatnot. So they needed a king. Because again, another invasion. So, this is from a tapestry, and this is a portrait of Harold. So, as I've said, there's much mystery about Harold. In 1064, some sources state that he was tasked with offering England to Duke William, as Edward's closest maternal kin. Other sources state that he was supposed to bring back Edward from Hungary, and he was to be heir. Now, of course, and this is probably biased, Norman chroniclers obviously state that Harold was knighted by William and that he had pledged his support to him. Northumbria raised in revolt in 1066 and joined Harold Hardrada while Edward was in a coma. Edward briefly awoke before dying, leaving his widow and England to Harold's protection. The Winton, then again, like I said, the council, declared Harold King of England the very next day. So Harold marches north to Northumbria, battles against Harold Hardrada, who is coming to invade England. Again, another Viking invasion. He defeats Harold, kills him. And then William, who, if we go here, Edward was cousins with Robert, Duke of Normandy. Robert has William the Bastard. As he's known before, he conquers England, and he is known as William the Conqueror. So, after Harold's death, the Winton declared Edgar II king. However, he was never crowned, and he knew that it was useless to fight William. Harold's children fled to Ireland, and there have been some claims they may have fled to Poland. Yes, Harold had children. I didn't go into his line because, again, I'm focusing mostly on the House of Wessex. And as I said, Edward, right, he was very weak. That royal power that his father had secured for him was gone with 3 Viking invasions, back to back to back. Most of the power of England had gone to the earls, especially Edward's father-in-law, Godwin, who, because of the power going straight to the earls, it led to unrest and lots of intrigue, especially because Edward had no heir. Now, the other thing, this is a portrait of Alfred. He was captured by Godwin, Edward's father-in-law, Earl of Wessex, and blinded and then killed. So Edward always had a distaste for his father-in-law. And Godwin was conniving and manipulative and trying to get his son onto the throne through marriage and whatnot. And it happened. Not because of Godwin himself, but because Edith and Edward never had an heir. And who else was there strong enough to take the kingdom but for Harold? To fight, again, as I said, Harold Hardrada. And then when William invades, this is a portrait of William the Conqueror. William becomes King of England. Harold dies, and as I said, his children fled to Ireland, and they could have ended up in Poland. And then William the Conqueror forms the House of Normandy, which will rule for another 3 to 4 generations before you get to the Plantagenets, and then the Tudors, and so on and so forth. And that is the House of Wessex with the kingdoms of England. Here's a quick map about some of the battles that happened. So up here you have the Battle of Fulford, where Harold Hardrada and Tolsty Godwinson, again, that is the brother of Harold. Tolsty betrayed his brother and joined up with Harold. They defeat Edwin and Morcar. Morcar was the Earl Mercia at that time. But then at the Battle of Stamford Bridge, Harold defeated Harald and Tolstig. He had to kill his own brother and kill Harold. And then they quickly marched back south, where you have the Battle of Hastings, because William lands in Pevensey by September 28th, 3 days after the Battle of Stamford Bridge. And then they fight October 14th. William defeats Harold, kills him. There's still some resistance after Harold is dead. In Southwark, William's repulsed mid-October. And then by December 25th, William is crowned King of England in London. I have here the list of the kings of England and their regnal dates. So Alfred the Great, Edward the Elder, Athelstan, Edmund I the Magnificent, Eadred, Edwig all Fair, Edgar the Peaceful, Edward the Martyr, Æthelred the Unready. Then the intercession, where the House of Wessex loses control of the Kingdom of England. So then you have Sweyn Forkbeard, and then you have Æthelred the Unready, Edmund Ironside, then again Cnut the Great, Harold Harefoot, Arthur Cnut, Edward the Confessor, Harold II, Godwinson, then Edgar Atheling, who was elected to be king. But again, William was in the country and was crowned, and yeah, nothing could be done about that. This is the Edgar that I'm talking about, who was crowned but never actually became king of England. Again, he's the one that settled in Scotland with his sister and brother-in-law, and they disappeared. Thank you. Again, I gained inspiration for doing these two videos from King and Conquer. It is a series on Amazon Prime. I have some pictures here of the characters that I just talked about. This is the portrayal of Edward the Confessor. I think he did a great job in portraying his historical accuracy. This is Harold Godwinson. And then coming up, we have Nicolaj, who portrayed William the Conqueror. I think he did a great job of portraying William the Conqueror, just as he did Jaime Lannister in Game of Thrones.